They say blood is thicker than water, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes that blood can poison everything it touches. I'm standing here today, looking at my brother's face, the same face that smiled at me during Dad's funeral, while he was already planning to steal everything that was rightfully mine, the same face that called me a worthless soldier playing dress-up when I came home from my 3rd deployment in Afghanistan. But right now, that face is white as snow, because he just found out who I really am. My name is Commander Elena Vasquez, and this is the story of how my own brother tried to destroy me, and how one phone call changed everything forever. The rain was hitting the cemetery like bullets that October morning. I remember thinking how fitting it was. Dad would have appreciated the military precision of those raindrops. He always said nature was the greatest drill sergeant of all. I stood there in my dress blues, watching them lower the only person who ever believed in me into the ground. My father, Colonel Marcus Vasquez, 35 years of service, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Medal of Honor, that now sat locked away in his study. Next to me stood my brother Dylan, Golden Boy Dylan, with his $1,000 suit and his real estate empire built on our father's connections. Dylan, who never served a day in his life, but somehow always managed to be Dad's business partner, while I was overseas dodging IEDs and losing friends in the sand. Elena, he whispered during the service, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. We need to talk about Dad's affairs after this. I should have seen it coming, but grief makes you stupid. Grief makes you trust people you shouldn't. The funeral reception was held at the old community center where Dad used to volunteer. The same place where he'd taught me to throw a perfect spiral when I was 8 years old. The same place where he'd practiced his retirement speech, the one he never got to give. I watched Dylan work the room like a politician, shaking hands, accepting condolences, playing the role of the grieving son perfectly. But I caught him checking his watch twice during Uncle Carlos's story about Dad's service in Desert Storm. After the last prayer was said and the flag was folded, Dylan pulled me aside. The rain had stopped, but the gray sky felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. Look, sis, he said, not even looking me in the eye. Dad's will. It's complicated. Complicated how? He pulled out a manila folder from his briefcase. His hands were steady, practiced. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. The house, the land, the savings. Dad left everything to me. You get his military decorations and his old uniforms. He paused, letting it sink in. I guess he figured you were already set with your military career. The words hit me like shrapnel. That's impossible. Dad promised me the ranch. He promised me we'd fix it up together when I retired. Dylan shrugged. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he realized you were never coming back anyway. I grabbed the papers with shaking hands. There it was, in black and white. Dad's signature, Dad's will, everything. The 200-acre ranch where I learned to ride, to shoot, to be strong, all of it going to Dylan. This doesn't make sense, I whispered. Makes perfect sense to me, Dylan said, already walking toward his BMW. Face it, Elena. You chose the military over family. Now you live with the consequences. I stood there in the parking lot as his taillights disappeared into the evening. The folder in my hands felt heavier than my full combat gear. Inside were the keys to my childhood home, which apparently wasn't mine anymore. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom for the last time. The walls were still covered with my high school track medals and my acceptance letter to West Point. Dad had framed that letter himself, said it was the proudest day of his life. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old text messages from him. The last one, sent 3 days before his heart attack, read, Mija, can't wait for you to come home. The ranch needs its future owner to help with spring repairs. Future owner. Those words burned now. But as I packed my few belongings into a duffel bag, all I could think about was what Dylan had said. You chose the military over family. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been gone too long. Maybe Dad really did change his mind about me. The next few months were a special kind of hell. I moved into a tiny apartment outside Fort Bragg, where I was stationed. 1 bedroom, thin walls, and a view of a parking lot that flooded every time it rained. It was a far cry from the ranch house with its wraparound porch and the view of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Dylan wasted no time. Within weeks, he'd sold the ranch to some developer from Charlotte. 200 acres of family history, gone, turned into a luxury subdivision called Vasquez Estates. He even had the audacity to keep our family name on it. Every day, I drove past the construction site on my way to base, watching them tear down the barn where Dad taught me to change oil, watching them level the pasture where I'd learned to ride, watching them pave over the creek where we used to catch fireflies on summer nights. But the worst part wasn't losing the land. The worst part was what happened at Cousin Maria's wedding that spring. The entire extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since before my deployments. I walked in wearing my dress uniform. It was all I had that was appropriate for a wedding. The same uniform that had once made Dad's chest swell with pride. But that night, it felt like a costume. "Elena," Aunt Rosa rushed over, her face lighting up. "Look at you! So beautiful in your uniform. Your father would be so proud." Before I could respond, Dylan appeared beside us with his new girlfriend, some blonde influencer with fake eyelashes and a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Oh, that's just Elena," he said with that practiced smile. Still playing soldier. Can't seem to let go of the dress-up games. The table went quiet. I felt heat creeping up my neck. "Dylan," I said carefully, "I'm a commander in the United States Army. I don't play anything." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Commander of what? A supply closet? Come on, Elena. We all know you're just some pencil pusher who happened to wear the uniform." His girlfriend giggled. "Oh my God, Dylan, you're terrible. But it is kind of cute that she still wears it to family events." "Cute?" The word came out sharper than I intended. 3 tours in Afghanistan is cute? Anyone can sit on a base and process paperwork," Dylan continued, taking a sip of his champagne. "Let's not pretend you're some kind of war hero. You're what, 32? And still just a mid-level officer? If you were any good at it, wouldn't you be further along by now?" The entire family was staring now. Cousin Maria, the bride, looked mortified. Uncle Carlos was studying his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. "I mean, look at me." Dylan gestured to himself with his champagne glass. "I'm running a multi-million-dollar business. I own 3 houses. I drive a car worth more than you make in a year. And what do you have to show for 15 years of playing Army?" His girlfriend leaned in closer to him. "Babe, maybe we should—" No. Dylan waved her off. "I think it's time someone told Elena the truth. Dad left me everything because he knew I could handle it, because I understand how the real world works, because I didn't waste my life playing G.I. Joe in the sandbox." The words cut deeper than any enemy fire I'd ever faced, because coming from family, they felt like they might be true. "The ranch Dad left me is worth $3 million now," Dylan continued, his voice getting louder. $3 million, Elena. Know how I know that? Because I sold it, because I understand business, because I didn't waste my life playing war games. That's when something inside me broke. Not snapped. Broke. Like a dam that finally gives way after holding back too much pressure for too long. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound echoed through the sudden silence. "You're right," I said quietly. "I have been playing dress-up." Dylan's smile widened. He thought he'd won. "I've been pretending that family meant something. Pretending that blood actually mattered. Pretending that the brother who used to build forts with me in the backyard wouldn't steal everything Dad worked for the moment he was in the ground." I picked up my purse, my hands steady, despite the storm raging inside my chest. "Enjoy the money, Dylan. I hope it keeps you warm at night." I walked out of that wedding with my head high and my heart shattered. Behind me, I could hear the whispers starting, the awkward attempts to change the subject. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I'd learned a long time ago that tears were a luxury soldiers couldn't afford. I drove home through the mountain roads, past the construction site that used to be our ranch. The security lights illuminated the foundation holes where our house used to stand. Even in the dark, I could see the sign, Vasquez Estates. Luxury living starts here. 2 weeks later, I was at my desk at Fort Bragg, reviewing supply requisitions for our upcoming deployment, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from Washington, D.C. "Commander Vasquez." "Commander, this is General Patricia Hayes from the Pentagon. Do you have a moment to speak privately?" My heart stopped. Generals from the Pentagon don't call mid-level supply officers. They just don't. "Of course, ma'am." "Commander, I have some news that's going to sound unusual. We've been trying to reach you about a matter concerning your father, Colonel Marcus Vasquez." "Ma'am? My father passed away 4 months ago." "Yes, I'm aware. That's why I'm calling." Commander, did your father ever mention Operation Nightfall to you? The name hit me like cold water. No, ma'am. Should he have? There was a pause. Commander, your father was involved in a highly classified operation during his final years of service. For security reasons, the details couldn't be disclosed until now. We've been conducting a review of his service record, and some discrepancies have come to light. What kind of discrepancies? The kind that change everything, Commander. Can you come to Washington? There are some people who need to meet with you, and there are some documents you need to see. The flight to D.C. felt like the longest 3 hours of my life. I kept thinking about Dad's last few years, how he'd travel for consulting work, how he'd sometimes get phone calls that made him step outside, how he'd always been vague about his retirement projects. 3 days later, I was sitting in a conference room in the Pentagon, staring at a stack of files that would change my life forever. The woman across from me was General Hayes, a 4-star general with silver hair and eyes that had seen more secrets than most people could imagine. Next to her sat a man in a suit who'd introduced himself only as Agent Morrison from the Department of Defense. Commander Vasquez, General Hayes began, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Your father, Colonel Marcus Vasquez, was not just a decorated combat officer. For the last 15 years of his service, he was one of our most valuable intelligence assets. She slid a photograph across the table. It showed my father, but not the version I knew. This man was younger, leaner, wearing civilian clothes and standing next to what looked like a government official in some Middle Eastern country. Your father spent years undercover, gathering intelligence that prevented numerous terrorist attacks on American soil. His work saved thousands of lives, Commander. Thousands. Agent Morrison leaned forward. The ranch, the land, the savings your brother inherited, none of that was your father's real estate. I don't understand. Your father's actual assets were held in classified government accounts. The ranch, the house, those were just his cover identity. His real estate portfolio, his investments, his government compensation for 15 years of classified service, that's all been held in trust, waiting for the right time to be released. General Hayes opened another folder. Commander, your father left explicit instructions. Everything, and I mean everything, was to go to you. The real estate, the investments, the government compensation, even a Medal of Honor that was classified until now. The room started spinning. How much are we talking about? Agent Morrison smiled for the first time. $12.7 million, Commander. Plus the classified Medal of Honor, plus a full pardon and explanation for any family members who may have been misled about your father's true service record. I stared at the papers in front of me. My father's real signature, his real will, his real legacy. There's more, General Hayes continued. Your father specifically requested that you be offered a position with military intelligence. Your service record, your linguistic abilities, your leadership in combat situations. You're exactly what we're looking for. What kind of position? Colonel, Commander, effective immediately, with back pay and full military honors. The words seemed to float in the air around me. Colonel, $12.7 million. The truth about my father. And suddenly, Dylan's face flashed in my mind. Dylan, who'd called me a mid-level pencil pusher. Dylan, who'd stolen what he thought was everything. General, I said slowly, there's something I need to do first. I drove back to North Carolina in my father's real car, a Mercedes S-Class that had been stored in a government facility for 4 months. The leather still smelled like his cologne. Dylan had called a family meeting to announce his engagement to the influencer girlfriend. The whole family would be there. Perfect. I pulled into the driveway of Cousin Maria's house wearing my new uniform, the one with the eagle insignia of a full colonel. The one with ribbons and decorations I'd never worn before because they'd been classified until 3 days ago. But more importantly, I was carrying a briefcase with documents that would change everything. The family was gathered in the living room when I walked in. Dylan was holding court, as usual, talking about his latest real estate deal. His girlfriend was showing off her engagement ring, a gaudy thing that probably cost a quarter of what he thought he'd inherited. Elena? Aunt Rosa called out. Look, everyone, Elena's here. Dylan turned around, and I watched his face go through several expressions. First confusion at my new uniform, then recognition of the rank insignia, then something that looked almost like fear. Wow, sis, he said, but his voice was shaky. New costume? Not a costume, Dylan. I set the briefcase down on the coffee table with a loud click. But we'll get to that. I looked around the room at my family. These people who'd watched Dylan humiliate me at the wedding. These people who'd said nothing when he called my service a joke. I have some news to share with everyone about Dad. Dylan's face went pale. Elena, if this is about the will again. Oh, it's definitely about the will. I opened the briefcase and pulled out the first document. See, Dylan, the thing is, you stole the wrong inheritance. The room went dead silent. Turns out Dad had 2 lives. The one you knew about, the ranch, the house, the savings account, and the one none of us knew about. I held up the photograph of Dad in his undercover role. Dad was a classified intelligence operative for 15 years. Everything you inherited, that was just his cover identity. Dylan was staring at the photograph like it might bite him. That's impossible. Is it? I pulled out the bank statements. $12.7 million, Dylan. That's what Dad's real estate was worth. And every penny of it was left to me. I watched the color drain from his face completely. But here's the best part, I continued, pulling out my promotion papers. Turns out the military doesn't forget about the children of its best operatives. I've just been promoted to full colonel, with a position in military intelligence, effective immediately. Dylan's girlfriend was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. I don't understand. Let me explain it simply, I said, my voice calm and steady. Dylan called me a mid-level pencil pusher, a failure, someone who never amounted to anything. I paused, letting that sink in. Dylan, I outrank 97% of the United States military. I have security clearance higher than most senators, and as of 3 days ago, I'm worth more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. The silence in that room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. But you know what the really funny part is? I leaned forward, looking directly into Dylan's eyes. You sold the ranch for $3 million. The ranch that Dad never actually owned. The ranch that belonged to the government as part of his cover identity. Dylan's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Which means, dear brother, that you just committed federal fraud, selling government property while impersonating a beneficiary of a classified estate. Elena, he whispered, you can't be serious. I stood up, closing the briefcase with a sharp snap. Deadly serious. The FBI will be contacting you tomorrow about returning the money you stole. All of it. Plus penalties. Plus the cost of the investigation. I looked around the room one more time. At the family who'd watched him humiliate me. At the relatives who'd said nothing when he called my service a joke. Oh, and Dylan? That development you built on Dad's land? The one called Vasquez Estates? The government wants that back too. Turns out building luxury homes on classified federal property is a bigger crime than we thought. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. By the way, the wedding's off, isn't it? I looked at his girlfriend, who was now staring at Dylan like she'd never seen him before. Smart girl. The FBI tends to freeze assets during federal investigations. Hope that ring was an investment. I opened the door, then paused one more time. Dylan, you were right about one thing. I was playing dress-up all these years. I was pretending to be someone smaller than I really am. Thanks for helping me remember who I actually am. And with that, I walked out of that house for the second time. But this time, I wasn't broken. This time, I was exactly who I was meant to be. I'm writing this from my new office in Washington, D.C. The view from the Pentagon isn't much, but the work is everything Dad hoped it would be. Dylan paid back every penny, plus interest. The FBI was surprisingly efficient about it. He lost the real estate business, the girlfriend, and last I heard, he was working at a car dealership in Asheville. The irony isn't lost on me. He's selling cars now, instead of selling stolen land. The family? Well, let's just say family gatherings are much quieter these days. Aunt Rosa calls me Colonel Elena now, and everyone seems very interested in my work. Funny how respect works, isn't it? I bought back Dad's ranch, the real one, not the fake one Dylan sold. Turns out the government was happy to sell it to me at a discount, considering the circumstances. I'm fixing it up, just like Dad and I planned. Every weekend I drive up there and work on the fence line, the same fence Dad and I built when I was 12. Sometimes, when the sun is setting over the Blue Ridge Mountains, I can almost hear his voice. Mija, he'd say. The uniform doesn't make the soldier makes the uniform. He was right. It just took me a while to understand what that meant. They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned something else. Honor is thicker than blood. Integrity is thicker than blood. And sometimes, the family that matters most isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you choose to serve. My name is Colonel Elena Vasquez. I serve my country, I honor my father's memory, and I sleep well at night knowing that justice, sometimes, really does prevail. And Dylan? Dylan learned that you should never underestimate someone just because they wear their honor on their sleeve instead of hiding it in a bank account. Some revelations change everything. This one changed me back into who I was always meant to be. You know what hurts the most? It's not the betrayal. It's not even losing everything I thought was mine. It's knowing that most people who heard my story, most people who felt what I felt in that moment when everything changed, they'll just move on. They'll close this video and forget. But here's the thing. I'm still here, still fighting, still sharing these stories because I know there's someone out there who needs to hear that they're not alone. Someone who's been underestimated, overlooked, forgotten. And if that's you, if my story touched something inside you, there's one small thing you can do that costs you nothing but means everything to me. Hit that subscribe button. I know. Almost nobody does it. Out of every 100 people who watch, maybe 2 subscribe. But that little red button, that's how I keep telling these stories. That's how I keep fighting for people like us. You don't owe me anything. But if you believe that everyone deserves their moment of truth, if you believe that the underestimated deserve to be heard, then subscribe. Because tomorrow, there's another story. Another person who thought they were forgotten. Another revelation that changed everything. And I want you there when it happens. Subscribe. It's free. It's simple. And it's the only way I can keep proving that everyone deserves their final revelation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. And thank you for being part of this family that actually understands what it means to fight back. See you in the next story.